Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. Do not alter your device, because the reason why the sound quality sounds the way that it does is because I'm recording direct from inside Newcastle Castle for this special bonus Halloween episode. And as you're going to discover, you're not just going to get one Geordie for Halloween, you're going to get two, because my special guest for this episode is Rob Kirkup from the How Haunted podcast. Enjoy. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host, Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. So Rob, how about you introduce yourself for all my lovely listeners?
I'd love to. I'm Rob Kirkup and I'm a fellow Geordie and I am the How Haunted podcast. It's just me. I do everything myself. And I've written a number of books on the paranormal, predominantly based in the northeast. So yeah, that's me, I think. You'll find out more about us as we chat.
Exactly. So the main thing is obviously we are sitting in I think the oldest building in Newcastle. We are sitting in Newcastle's Castle recording this, so there will be weird noises in the background because for some reason tourists keep trying to get into the room that we're in, which is really annoying. Trains keep going past and there's the ever-present sirens. So I do apologise about that in advance. But we are here for all things ghostly, as it is obviously Halloween. So what I'm curious about is what got you fascinated with ghosts?
So I think I need to go back to when I was a child and I was probably 7 or 8, something like that. And every week, from when I was younger than that, my nana would take me and my brother to the little local library in the village that I grew up in. And I would get out kids' books and I was quite content with that. But one day I thought, you know what, I want to know what's going on in the adult section, or the grown-up section rather, where I could see that there was books that I just I felt I wasn't allowed to go and look at, or I wasn't old enough to go and look at, but I got up on my tiptoes and I went and spoke to the librarian behind the counter and said, can I go and get books out from over there? And she said, yeah, you go and pick whatever you want and come back and I'll check them out and you can take them home. And I went and had a look and there was all sorts of non-fiction books which were brand new to me. I mean, up until then I'd only ever looked at The Hungry Caterpillar and stuff like that, like kids' books. And there was books about cars and sport and all sorts of things. And then I found this tiny little section about the paranormal, which was a new concept to me. I had no idea what it even was. But on the front of one of the books, there was some very famous ghost photographs that everybody would immediately recognise. And I thought, I need to know more about this. So I checked out the handful of paranormal books rather that I had and took them home, and I was hooked. I was terrified and I wouldn't go upstairs in the house on my own, and it led to some nightmares, but I couldn't stop reading. I wanted to know more. It was, it opened my eyes, I think, to the fact that there's stuff out there that isn't necessarily black or white.
Yeah, I think that is the thing, and I think for me it was more a question of I can't remember never being or not being interested in ghosts, if that makes sense. Because as I say, I'd always been aware of them as long as I can remember. And then I always say when people ask how I got into folklore about those pamphlets like Ghosts and Legends of Northumbria, and I got one of those when I was about 9 or 10. I can't remember where from. I want to say it was from Chillingham Castle, but I could be wrong. And I remember just sort of starting to collect those and read the ghost stories, particularly of where I was from, and we started collecting them for like everywhere that I went. So I've got one for like Dartmoor and the Peak District and Edinburgh and the Tower of London. And so then I just kind of started taking an interest in them, and then as I got older obviously started exploring them less in terms of something that was just story based, but more something that people were actually experiencing. So obviously then, when the likes of Most Haunted came on TV and things like that, and obviously reading books about ghosts in a slightly more, I want to say, scientific way. I mean, my brain just went straight to like the Osborne Book of Ghosts. I'm like, I don't know how scientific that is.
I don't think it's particularly scientific, but as far as ghost books go, it's maybe the most scientific you're going to get. It's a book everybody knows.
Yeah, it's an absolute classic. It really is. So if that's how you got into ghosts in terms of fascination, how did you get into ghost hunting? Was that through a similar curiosity, or was that more of an accident?
It was more of a happy accident, I would say. So in the northeast, anybody listening from the northeast will know immediately what I'm talking about, but anybody outside will have no idea. On local radio, growing up, there was a show called Alan Robson's Night Owls, the Flashing Blade, as he called himself. And Alan Robson was still is a northeastern institution. He was on local radio for over 40 years before his show was sadly no longer on air in more recent years. And back in 2002, I was working in a very dull data entry job where I wasn't allowed to talk to the person sitting next to us, which seems almost barbaric, really, doesn't it? But I got paid depending on how fast I could type. But I was allowed to listen to music or listen to the radio. So I found that because it was such a dull job, if I listened to music, I'd fall asleep. Alan Robson was on between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning on weekdays, and he was famous in the region for his late night phone-in show, but also his spooky shows. Like he used to do something special at Halloween. And I used to tape Night Owls on a night time. Like I'd put in a cassette, tape for 45 minutes, turn it over, record for another 45 minutes, and I'd do that until I fell asleep. And then in the morning I'd take all of my cassettes with us to work, and this sounds really sad, doesn't it?
Not really. People would stream it now.
Yeah, they would. They'd be able to go on an app, but I didn't have an app back then. I didn't even have a mobile phone. So it makes us feel and sound really old. I
know what you mean, so how do you think I feel?
Anyway, I'd record Alan and I'd listen to Night Owls. Alan would keep us company at work, so I'd listen to Night Owls, people ringing in about stuff. And he said on one show, he said, this year for Halloween, I'm going to ask if you want to be involved in the Halloween show, write in. Tell me why I should pick you to be one of my on-the-spot ghost hunters. And I'm going to send people to haunted locations in the region. I'm going to stay in the studio, and if you see or hear anything, you're going to ring the show immediately on the hotline, and I'll get you on air. And I thought, that sounds brilliant. I just left I graduated from university 2 years before that, and I thought, I'll round up a couple of my university pals, we'll go and look for some ghosts. This is going to be class. I'll write to Alan, and he'll pick me. So I wrote Alan a letter, can't remember what I said. And then a few days later on the show, he said, I've had 5,000 letters so far, or something like that. I'm going to pick the best 10. And I thought, well, it was a nice idea while it lasted. It's clearly never going to happen. But a few days later, I got home from work, and there was a letter waiting for us. And it had the Metro Radio postmark on it, like a stamp. And I thought, it can't be, can it? It can't be. And when I opened it, I now know what Charlie must have felt like when he opened that bar of chocolate and got a glimpse of that golden ticket, because it was a handwritten letter. I'd been picked. I was one of the lucky 10. And Alan sent me to a haunted lake in Cumbria called Tork and Tarn, which I've done an episode about. If anybody's curious, I think it was episode 49. And it's a glacial lake, fairly unremarkable. It's something that, it's beautiful if you go during the day. Like, there's a lot of rowing takes place on it, and there's a lot of fishing happens there. But other than that, it's a lake in a county full of lakes. But the month before I went, so Halloween 2002 was the date of my first ever paranormal investigation. The month before I went, 20 odd people had seen the bloody apparition of a woman walk from the lake in broad daylight while they were feeding the ducks and eating ice creams. Walk towards them and then just disappear. And there's a legend of a girl called Jessie, who was a young woman who lived in the area many years ago, and she was killed by her lover, who drowned her in the water and then put her body in a couple of sacks and buried her beneath the lake somewhere. And it's said that she walks from the lake. So Alan sent us to go and find out what was going on. It was an interesting night. It was, nothing really happened. We did see some doggers. So, but then again, I mean, it's Halloween, isn't it? It's the perfect night to get the willies. And we heard some noises, and we saw some flashing lights in the trees. And I mean, we thought we were the only people there, but I was hooked. I started organising my own investigations, because back then, like 2002, 2003, there wasn't all of the event companies that they are now, where you can just go online. We didn't have the internet for starters. Well, we did, but it was in its
rudimentary.
It wasn't where it is today. There wasn't the event companies where you could go and just book onto a ghost hunt, pay 50 quid or whatever, and away you go. I organised my own, and the first one I think we did following that night was in the building that we're sat. Early 2003. I investigated this building.
I love the fact it's kind of come full circle, like 20 years later,
Yeah,
except we've come when it's full of tourists.
Yeah.
It's funny how these things happen, because like I got into ghost hunting kind of by accident, because it was one of those things I'd always been aware of weird stuff happening in places that I'd been, and obviously I've got a whole episode about weird things that have happened to me, and a lot of it is kind of, I bet the skeptics are going, oh, but I'm sure there's another explanation, and I'm like, yeah, there probably is, but like at the end of the day you can't say one way or the other. But one of my friends worked for one of the paranormal companies that I think is now defunct, and we went to Washington Old Hall, and there were certainly like weird things happened there that again could have been just imagination, might not have been. And I think part of the problem with doing them on like a group when punters have just turned up and wanted to do it like for funsies or whatever, is the fact that you've got the people who absolutely refuse to accept anything's happening, and they just kind of sit there looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. You've got the ones who, like, somebody drops a paper clip and they wee themselves because they're primed to expect something terrifying, so they've experienced something terrifying. And then you've got the ones who make it all about themselves, so it's not the best environment, really. Now, I'm saying this while I've literally just on the way here signed up to do the one at the Lytton Phil in January, and that's on the day after 12th night, so if that's not a spooky time of year, I don't know what is. So that'll be exciting. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where ghost hunting has become such big business, hasn't it? And it's not necessarily for the investigative side of it anymore, and it's more, I think, become like paranormal entertainment.
Yeah, it has. And I get it, like, it's huge business, and it's easy money for the building, wherever it may be, and the company who do it. I mean, there's some really, really good entertainment companies out there who I think make it very accessible to people who want to go along and get involved. And dare I say as well, there's the aspect of there being safety in numbers. Like if you go along on an investigation, there's 20 people there, you know you're going to be okay. But it's far cry from when I started doing it, and I was organising my own and doing the Castle Keep with 3 people. It was it was easier in a sense to get into places, but at the same time it wasn't as easy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I couldn't just go online and say, right, I'm going to go and do an investigation. Fancy doing an investigation this Saturday, who's doing what where, and just pay me 50 quid or whatever it may be and go. But yeah, it's very different how it was when I started doing it 20 years ago. So,
as we're talking about ghost hunting, this is a 2-part question, and your answer might be the same place, it might not be.
Yeah.
But what is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you on a ghost hunt, and where is the oddest place that you've ever done an investigation?
The oddest place I've done an investigation was at a hairdresser's in Burley, over in Gateshead. That was in about 2005, 2006, and I don't remember how it came about. I think they, if I remember rightly, I think they got in touch with me and told us that something had happened. Don't remember, but I don't remember. Yeah,
did anything happen?
I don't think so. I feel like I need to make like a hair-raising pun at some point, but I'm not. I'm not gonna. But I don't remember anything necessarily happening. I think it was probably. I mean, the thing is, like, being in a place like that and doing a ghost hunt, like being in a, you feel like you should be in a castle or an old church or an old hall rather than being surrounded by dryers and pairs of scissors. And the thing is, you don't want to be around loads of pairs of scissors if there's a poltergeist or something like that happening anyway. But yeah, that was a little bit strange. Also, I've done as far as strange places go, I've investigated both the York and Edinburgh dungeon, and they're strange in the sense that they're scary by design.
Yes. Rather
than anything else, so they're a little bit peculiar. So yeah, that I suppose if I think about it, they're odd places to be doing investigations. But then again, I think it was the Edinburgh dungeon had to be exorcised when it first opened.
Really? I mean, that's such a weird thing to do considering where it is, because it's just right next to Waverley Station. But I guess when you consider the history of the Norloch, which was there originally, I can kind of see why there might be stuff associated with it.
Yeah, I think it was Edinburgh, maybe York. The two of them are quite merge into one in my mind. The strangest thing that happened on an investigate. Do you mean strangest as in scariest, or the strangest as in most peculiar?
You can answer both if you want, because I do love just the general weird, but then obviously I'm all about the scary as well.
Weird. I'll give you them both. I mean, why not? It's Halloween, isn't it?
Aye.
So I would say the weirdest thing that happened was at the Golden Fleece in York, back in 2000 I think it was 2011, because I did a book about York where me and a few of my mates investigated 10 of the scariest places in York. And I mean, I've just put out a bonus episode about it, about what happened, but it was a very, very strange night. It was very active. I know it's a building that a lot of people know as being supposedly one of the most haunted in York, but it really did live up to expectations, which is you don't often say about a lot of places. We were in certain bedrooms and we were saying, "Can you copy this?" And we're getting 3 knocks in response to 3 knocks. There was knocking at the door of the rooms we're in, and when we opened the door, seconds later there was nobody there. But when we got down into the bars, like after the cleaners had done their bit, this was 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Nobody in the building other than us. And we went into one of the bars. One of my mates said, "Why don't you," or one of the team rather, said, "Why don't you go into that dark corner over there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And I went into this corner and there was like a pile of clothes or something on a seat. And I went to move it, and from in amongst all of this clothes or whatever it was, 2 eyes looked at us, and I've never been so scared. Like, I've never been so scared. And I said to them, "There's eyes." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "Yeah, there's eyes there." And one of them looked on the table and said, "There's a pair of shoes," and we just ran away. we just ran away. Like, I'm assuming it was somebody who worked in the pub or something like that, but for whatever reason, like, and now I don't know, thinking back on it, why we didn't just, like, I mean, I was standing looking at them, shining me torch into the face. They should have said something to me. But I don't know why I didn't just say, like, "Who are you?" Yeah. Like, "What are you doing here?" It was a very strange night, and then that evening culminated in our investigation finishing at 3 in the morning. But 4 in the morning, we were still in the building because we got locked in, because somebody went home and forgot about us.
The worst kind of lock-in.
Yeah. I called the chapter the lock-in.
And it's also a building full of spirits.
Yeah, very good.
See what I did
very
there.
Good. And one of my mates, Richard, saying, "Look, if we're not in here by 4 o'clock, I'm going to have a couple of free pints. This is ridiculous." And the thing is, I mean, there was 3 bedrooms in there. We could have easily just spent, like, if we had to, we could have spent the night, but I managed to kind of get out of a door that was open to a degree, but there was like a Jeep parked right up against it. So we managed to get out. We managed to escape this building that was trying to keep us captured. Strangest thing that's happened, like the scariest thing that's happened to us on investigation. I mean, I've already, like, we were chatting about this while we were waiting to get into this room that we're in, but it was at Chillingham Castle, I think. And I've talked about this on one of my episodes. I think episode 3 of my podcast is Chillingham. And we went along, it was December 2005, so it was 18 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was a freezing cold December evening, and when we got there was one person at the castle, a bloke called Bob, and he was putting up a Christmas tree, and he was a security for the night. And when we got there, he said, I talked to them, you know. And I said, "You what?" He says, yeah, they're dead. I talked to them. I'm like, "Oh, okay, Bob, no problem." And he said, "If you need us to do anything, like if you need us to have a word or like stir up something, just give us a shout." And I'm like, "Okay, Bob, we'll bear that in mind." And then we just went off and did our thing. But that was about 10 o'clock at night, and it got to like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and absolutely nothing has happened. This was I've investigated Chillingham twice now, and this was the first time, and I had such high hopes for it because, I mean, it was the place to go, especially back then. It was quite difficult to get in as well. And I was so disappointed that nothing had happened that I said, "Look, we're gonna have to bring out our secret weapon. Where's Bob?" So I went and found Bob, and he came around with us, and he was in his element. Like, he was coming around, he was part of the team. There was 5 of us and Bob, and we're going room to room. We're in like the Great Hall and the torture chamber and the oubliette and all of these other rooms. And he was saying like, "Oh, there's such and such spirit here, and there's a ghost of a man and there's a ghost of a woman, and we're like, oh, can you make them do anything? And then the spirits would fade away. Typical. So it got to about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and we were in the chapel, and it was the last room we did, because when we got there, one of the team, one of my friends, was nearly asleep, and I thought, I'm going to have to drive us home. It's a dark night, it's cold, and we're probably going to have to leave. So I was just about to say, like, Bob, this has been lovely, but... And before I could speak, he said, oh... And I remember this like it was yesterday, even though, as I say, it was nearly 18 years ago now. He said, oh, there's a ghost of a young boy just came into the room. He's called Eric. He's 12 or 13-year-old, and the really tragic thing about Eric is that he doesn't know he's dead. He's wandering the castle looking for his parents who were killed here. And Eric likes to let people know he's around. He plays tricks. So what he does is his party pieces... And in the chapel, for anybody who's visited Chillingham, there's a big... If you're in the chapel sitting in the pews looking out, you've got the Great Hall to your left, and then in front of you you'd have a balcony which overlooks the tea room, like the little coffee shop. And he said he moves... So instead of there being a door there's this big, thick, heavy curtain. He said he moves the curtain to let people know he's around and to scare them. And no sooner had Bob finished talking that this curtain that was hanging perfectly still, even though it is a drafty old castle in December, this curtain started moving into the room where we were as if there was two hands on the other side pushing it with purpose into the room. It moved into the room where we were really slowly, not wafting backwards and forwards in the breeze. And it was as if there was two hands on the other side. The bottom of it raised up off the ground, and it just stopped in the room, and I could see behind the curtain and there was nobody there. And everybody in the castle was in that room. And then it slowly moved back level, and then it moved back into the room again, and then it just stopped, and we sat watching it for another 10-15 minutes, and it never happened again. And to this day, I know it was just a curtain moving, but I can't explain it. And it rocks my belief system, because it made me think, hang on, like, do I believe in medium psychics? I wasn't convinced about Bob. Like, he's a complete unknown. Like, to take his word about the fact that there's the ghost of whoever in the room, I'm not going to do that. You know, that'd be crazy. But Bob told me what was going to happen. Then it happened, and I think about that all the time. To this day, like, I'll keep me awake at night trying to work out what happened. Don't know.
That is really good, and it's not a common thing that people report in relation to children. Because everyone, I know, like, people still talk about the Radiant Boy even now. Yeah. But people don't mention, because I know which curtain you mean. It's like just next to the Minstrels Gallery, isn't it?
Yeah. It separates the Minstrels Gallery from the chapel.
Yeah, and that is a substantial curtain.
Oh, it's the floor to ceiling, thick, big, thick. I've been to Chillingham many times since, and I've messed about with this curtain, trying to work out what could have caused it, and no idea.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, you need to see if there's a degree of replicability to what's happening. And, like, I'm thinking for me, because obviously I've already talked about the weird experience I had at Geordie Castle with one of my characters from a book coming through on a Ouija board, and that I wasn't actually touching either, but that's in another episode. I'm not going to go through it again here, but there's two that, like, I can't explain. And one of them is from here, and one of them is from Suter Lighthouse. And the one from Suter Lighthouse there wasn't really a huge amount going on, to be completely honest. It wasn't Ouija board related, so therefore probably just people talking to their subconscious. But we're going along towards the actual bottom of the lighthouse itself, and I mean, there's a cracking view from the top, you know what I mean? It's well worth a visit just to have a look at. It's well worth a view just to have a look at, and also the views of the lighthouse itself are pretty cool. And again, there'll be a photo of what it looks like in the video for this on YouTube. And one of the things that was quite interesting was I happened to look into what I think might have been the old engine room or something, and the door was locked because I tried it because I'm nosy and I wanted to see what was in it. And the top half of the window's glass, bottom half's like solid wood, like proper wooden door. And I happened to just peer in, being nosy, and something, or because I won't say someone, because I could see there wasn't a person inside the room, and also who would lock themselves into a room where that was the only way in and out. Like, that's, I mean, I know we've locked ourselves in here.
I was about to say, we're locked in a room where it's the only way in or out. Yeah,
because people won't stop trying to come in. But but I was looking into the room and I could see it was empty, and there was this almighty, like, thud on the inside of the door, as if someone had kicked, like, a door that was stuck, you know, when you're trying to get a door to open. And obviously it was so strong that it actually rattled it in the frame. So obviously I moved away from the door because I was like, that's a bit weird. But like I'm in the way, so nobody's done anything from behind me because I too like the door and quite substantial. And then you had this, as I say, kick on the other side. Now, cannot work out what that was because the room was definitely empty. And it wasn't like a door just expanding or contracting with cold. It was a very definite like thud sort of noise. That was one of the weird ones. And the one here... And it's funny because I was just talking about this the other day with someone, there's a room called the Bloodstained Chamber, you know, the one up next to the Great Hall in here. And again, there's a photo of this on the YouTube video. And there's these really suspicious looking stains on the wall that some people reckon are rust, some people reckon are blood stains. Who knows? I mean, I'm not going to lick them to see what they taste like because I don't think that's massively scientific.
I think they should.
Or sanitary. But anyway, though, so we were in there on an investigation, and the guy leading the team had brought along one of those laser pointers because he had 3 cats and he used to love chasing the dot. But what you could do is you could turn like a little thing on it, and it would split the dot into like a grid. So you have like a grid.
I've got one of them. Yeah.
And he'd put it like up a height, so none of us were touching it. He'd put it up a height in like this little sort of like niche in the wall. So it was projecting the dots on the far wall, and we were all kind of standing under it. Now, he, at 6'5", was the only one who was tall enough to be able to reach it. Yeah. And he was standing, like, closer to the door. So nobody was near who could touch the little device. And if anybody's seen Paranormal Activity 4, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, there's a bit in it where a Microsoft Kinect, you know when they brought this out for the 360, where you were the controller.
I'm a PlayStation man, but I am aware of it.
I mean, I'm still on the GameCube, so, you know. But when you talk about cassettes and feeling old, it's like, man. But anyway, so it projects, obviously, this grid of dots across the room. And then in Paranormal Activity 4, you see this little figure cross in front of the dots. Because obviously, anywhere that there's something in front of the dot, obviously, it breaks it. And then the Kinect knows that you're standing there. And the same thing was happening with this laser grid, where like half the dots would turn off, or just some of them would. And you'd get these weird patterns of darkness, where it was as if something was blocking the grid, but you couldn't see where the dots were ending. Like if I had suddenly stood in front of it, you would then see the grid of dots on my back. But there was nobody between us and the grid that we could see. And you couldn't see the dots suddenly stopping, they just disappeared. And bearing in mind the dot is one beam of light being spread into lots, we could not work out how, and it was because it was also responding. So Dave might be like, oh, could you turn off the dots on the right? And then the ones on the right would go off and then they'd come back on. But right, can you turn the ones off at the top? And they would go. And it was very, very odd because it was in response to something. Okay. And it was a really cool experiment. I don't remember us actually using that again, which is, or we might have done it, it might not have worked, but it definitely did in that room. So, and it would also respond to some people and not others, which was really weird. So it was really hit and miss. It was like I was doing it and it was responding, which, you know, it'd be nice if my students did the same. And then other people would try and it just nothing would happen. So it was, again, it felt like there was some kind of intelligence there, but I don't know who or what.
No, I mean I've got one of those laser grid things that you're talking about, and I don't know how that could happen.
It's weird, and I think that's why I like that one, because it's based on like electronics and optics rather than just like just while you were talking before that, I got like a weird chill down one side, and I'm like, oh my god, is that supernatural, or is it because that's the side facing the door? Yeah. But that's still also personal experience. But when it's like a group of like 20 people watching dots turning on and off, A, it's like, is that how you spend your Saturday night? And B, it's what caused that? So that was very, very odd. So I want to go and have a look in there later on and just see if anything else weird happens during the day. That segues in really nicely. It's almost like I know what I'm doing. Into talking about the castle as a building. Obviously, you and I have both encountered people who weren't aware Newcastle had a castle.
All the time. I reckon I've encountered more people who don't know that Newcastle's got a castle than do.
Which is worrying.
I don't know if it's because it's not in the city centre, so to speak. Like, it's not the Haymarket, like the top end of Newcastle. But I mean, literally on Friday, I was having a conversation with somebody who said, I've got a half day on Monday. I'm like, what are you doing? I said, I'm off to the castle in Newcastle. I'm like, what, Newcastle's got a castle? I'm like, yeah. Why do you think it's called Newcastle? But yeah, look, I don't know. It should be better known than it is. Yes. And it's nice to see it so busy today. Yeah,
it's been really cool. And I love the fact that they put so many events on, like when they do the film screenings. Because I remember coming to see I want to say it was Cabinet of Dr. Caligari here, with like a choir up in the gallery doing like, because obviously with it being silent film, so they'd produced their own soundtrack.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And then I also saw like, what was it? It was one of the Abbott and Costello ones. Might be when they meet the Wolfman. I saw that here. And
that scene that did, they were playing all of Blackadder or something like that. Yeah, I didn't come to see it, but I was tempted.
I must admit, the one problem is the fact that obviously it is like a 12th century Norman stone building. It's not famous for its heating.
No, I can vouch for that right now.
Yeah.
I wish I'd brought a coat. I mean, I'm a Geordie, I shouldn't even have a top on, to be perfectly honest.
True.
I should just be in a t-shirt.
What is it? I took my parka off and now I'm like looking at it longingly, like what was I thinking?
I want to wear it.
Because I was nice and warm when I came in, and now I'm definitely not. But this is the thing, I think, that is also something that you've got to bear in mind on ghost hunts, the fact that you're in a really cold building at night where you're expecting stuff to happen. Anyway, so the castle itself, obviously this isn't the original castle.
No, so the castle dates back to 1080, or at least that's when the original castle dates back to. And it was built by William the Conqueror's eldest son, Robert. Well, it wasn't built by him, it was built under the orders of him, Robert Curthose, William the Conqueror's eldest son. Because after the Normans successfully invaded England in 1066, William the Conqueror went castle mad, like ordering castles to be built all over the country. I've just recorded a podcast about Dover Castle that will come out in a couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
It's got the scariest listener story I've ever heard on in my life. Anybody who listens to it may well be put off doing a paranormal investigation. I was sitting in the house recording it on my own, and I genuinely got scared.
Oh,
like, I did. It's scary. It's terrifying. Anyway, the story of Newcastle's Castle Garth, as it was, and Dover Castle is very similar. They were built around the same time originally in
same
wood.
Engineer, isn't it? For the stone one is.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's Morris the engineer.
Oh yeah, Morris. Yeah, and then they were rebuilt in stone at a later time. So Newcastle's castle was rebuilt under the orders of Henry I, and I think Dover Castle was Henry II. But it was this castle was rebuilt in about 1060 something or 1070 something in stone. As we
1170.
Did I say 10?
Yeah.
It's been a long day, and it's only Monday. Yeah, you keep us right. Yeah, but it's an incredible building. Could never tire of visiting it.
I think it's been so many different things as well through its history, because obviously it was the jail at one point, and it's weird because we've got a king and queen chamber, but no evidence that any kings or queens ever actually stayed here.
No.
And it's very much kind of like, I guess because it's also standing on the site of the old Roman fort at Ponselius as well, it's kind of built very much for defence and sort of kind of like showing off your might to your neighbours rather than it being a comfortable palatial...
Yeah, I mean, it's in a very strategic location overlooking the glorious River Tyne.
Yeah, the best river in the world.
Yeah, by a mile.
I mean, it's not like we're biased or anything.
No, not at all. But I mean, some of the stuff that happened here is like awful. It should be haunted.
Yeah,
like, there's so many stories of body parts being displayed on the walls, and like the witches and the wizard that was supposedly taken over to the town where they were held in the garrison room.
Was it?
Supposedly.
Oh, okay.
I mean, is it written anywhere historically? Supposedly. I mean, it might be a more fanciful legend or retelling.
It would have been kept in Newgate.
Well, supposedly they were held in what is now known as the garrison room until they were taken to the town where to be executed, supposedly. And as I said, I mean, the history of the castle's quite tricky to follow through, because there's certain things that have maybe been published in more recent years or told in more recent years, which lend itself to the paranormal aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those kind of things where you then wonder if you're going to get that, a bit like the Philip experiment, where you think because so many people believe that there's a particular ghost and specifically related to flowers, do people then start to experience that if they've been told that there's a ghost? Well, oh, look at me being a skeptic for a change. But it does make you wonder, and it is one of those kind of buildings where I think it's kind of freaky, just in the sense that, like, you know, the floors aren't even and it's very, very cold, and you know, you have weird noises, and then you suddenly discover that if it's on a night time, it's more than likely drunks outside.
Yeah.
And B, during the day, it's probably a train.
Probably. I mean, you've got that weird staircase that just leads to nowhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, they've opened that up now.
Oh, they?
Yeah, it goes back to where it was supposed to now.
I don't know if I like that.
But then there's also the staircase that goes down the side of the Great Hall, where I remember one person telling me repeatedly that someone nearly pushed them down the stairs there, and it's not. It's because one particular stair's been worn away, because the whole thing's made out of sandstone, which isn't famous for its longevity.
No.
And it means that when you go to put your foot down, I mean, health and safety would have a field day, but the stair's not quite where you're expecting it to be, so you stumble. It's not that someone's trying to push you, it's just that it's a wonky stair.
Yeah, it is an incredibly atmospheric building, I think. If you come along on a stormy winter's day to visit and you might be the only person in the castle, I love it. I can't get enough of it.
So I said a weird thing that happened when I was here, but have you had anything weird happen during ghost hunts or just general visits? Because I know you said it's like 20 years. No, it's not. You've been back since 20 years ago.
I've been back. Yeah. I've only investigated it once, and that was in that time in 2003. On that time in 2003, the only thing that really happened that seems a bit strange was we were down in the garrison room next to the room that, like, it's locked off. There's like a little cell. It opened up and we got access to it, and we recorded what sounded like a woman's scream. And obviously there's the story of the Poppy Girl.
Yeah.
But it was a Friday night in Newcastle, next to a big door.
Yeah.
It was almost
opposite a pub.
Certainly a drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah. The best story I've got relating to the Castle Keep isn't mine.
That's fine.
Not long after I investigated it, I got an email off a guy whose name I can't remember. It's lost to time. I might still have the email somewhere, I don't know. But he said, I'm going to do an investigation at the castle. Can I pick your brains about what's going on? And I mean, it was back before a lot of the information about the castle was so readily available, like online and in books. And I said, yeah, no problem. And I met him in the Bridge Hotel, just next to the castle. Me and a couple of my mates came along, and he came along, and I drank then, so I had a couple of pints, like I'm teetotaler. We had a couple of pints and we had a chat, and we befriended him. And he said, if you want to come along and do the investigation, there's only me and my mate, so you can come along. But it was such short notice, I couldn't do it for whatever reason. So him and his mate did an investigation in the castle, just the two of them. And I never heard anything from him. And then about 6 months later, one of my mates said, did you find out how that guy got on when he did the ghost hunt at Castle Keep? And I said, no, I forgot to ask him. So I dropped him an email, and I got a reply, and his reply started off by saying, I'm never going to do another paranormal investigation, I'm never going to do another ghost hunt. And he went on to explain what happened and the reason why. And this isn't my story, this is something that he told me, so take it with a pinch of salt if you wish. But he said that it got to about 4 o'clock in the morning, nothing had happened, so him and his mate decided to do a Ouija board, and they got a bloke called Paul, who was the security guy here, to help them. And the three of them did it, and he said it was moving around, but it wasn't spelling out anything. And it got to about 6 o'clock in the morning, and he decided to call it a night and go home, or call it a morning, given it was 6 o'clock, and go home. And he was fairly local, but him and his partner had just had a baby. So when he got home, she was sitting up waiting for him, and she said, "How did it go?" And they got chatting about it. And he said, "Oh no, I've missed a bit out." When he was driving home, he kept catching a glimpse of something in his rearview mirror, as if there was somebody sitting in the back. But he put it down to his imagination. He'd spent all night looking, thinking, and talking about ghosts. So he just thought, it's nothing, I'm tired, I need some sleep. But yeah, so he got home, and his girlfriend or his wife was sitting up already because they had a baby, so they weren't getting any sleep. And they got chatting, saying, like, how did it go? And he said, I'm going to go and check on the baby, and then I'm going to go to bed. And he went in the room where the baby was. And through the baby monitor, like the two-way monitor thing that they have, his partner said, what's going on in there? And he said, what do you mean? And she said, what's that noise? He went back through to the living room or wherever they were, the kitchen, and in the room where the baby was, there was a whisper. Somebody talking. He'd left the room. There was nobody in the room now other than the baby. There was just a whisper, like the sound of somebody whispering. And he went back in the room, and he was like trying to work out what was going on. Like, was the window open or something? Was it somebody outside? And he heard her through the intercom saying, it's getting worse. And he came back out, and it sounded like there was multiple people speaking in this room where the baby was. And he went back in a third and final time. And when he went in, the baby was awake, And he was like putting his head in the cot saying, "Are you okay?" Because clearly there was something not quite right here. And like the mobile above the cot started to spin. And she said, "What the hell's going on in there?" And he grabbed the baby and he went to get out of the room. The door slammed shut. He ran down the stairs with the baby. He felt as if somebody was pushing him, trying to get him down the stairs. And when he went back into the room where his partner was, it was like there was 100 voices talking, laughing, screaming in this room where the baby was. They just fled the house. They went to her parents, his parents, and he had to get the place exorcised. But he wouldn't move back in, so when he sent me the email, he was trying to sell it.
Wow.
It sounds like something from a horror film. Not my story, but hell of a story.
It certainly is that.
Yeah. So, don't do ghost hunts, kids. Scary stuff happens.
Well, on that note, I think we should probably end that here, because who knows what I might have picked up on the background of this other than kids sitting making funny noises at the door.
And the train.
And the sirens and the guy with really bad music on his car stereo.
Yeah.
Apart from all of that, who knows what else might be on the background of this. So if there is anybody present who would like to communicate with us, you are going to be on Fabulous Folklore, so do please feel free to say hello. Nothing.
No, it was worth a try. Shy Ben's getting out.
Exactly. But thank you very much for your time.
That's been lovely. It's been lovely.
Oh, and plug your episode, plug your stuff.
Oh, so I've got quite a lot of excitement. I mean, it's Halloween, isn't it? It's like this is like
our
Santa.
time of year.
Yeah, it's like Santa at Christmas. But I'll wait for the train to pass so everybody hears this in perfect audio, because this is my opportunity. But so for Halloween, I have done The Ghosts of Jack the Ripper's Whitechapel.
Oh, cool.
It's an hour and a half long.
Nice.
Took a lot of work. But,
you went round, didn't you?
Well, I didn't record it. I went to Whitechapel and I went to the sites where the Ripper killed those poor women, but I didn't record it in Whitechapel because it was quite scary.
Yeah.
It was quite scary. But it was a very difficult thing to put together, to be honest, because it's such a horrible thing. But so I've done that and then I've recorded the many haunts of the gunpowder plot at Guy Fawkes in readiness for bonfire night, so that'll be out on Friday the 3rd. My Halloween episode will be out on Friday the 27th. And as a bonus, my Patreon episode for the beginning of this year, which was me investigating 35 Stonegate in York, that's coming out on the morning of Halloween on the standard feed for everybody.
Excellent.
So that was an interesting night as well. That was, dare I say, if I hadn't talked about Newcastle Castle when we were talking about scary things that had happened, I might have talked about what happened there. It was mad. But yeah, listen to my podcast, How Haunted. I mean, it's the right time of year for it. Give it a go. You might not like it, but you might.
Way to sell yourself.
Well, what can I say? I'm a modest kind of guy. I'm amazed anybody listens to it, but I'm touched by how many nice messages I get from people.
So if anybody listening to this likes my accent, and I do get enough social messages to know that you do, you see, you can have more of it in the form of Rob.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee, or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.